obscure tour at the edge of the internet. I am your host, the Nameless Tour Guide, and today we are discussing all things Priscilla as we go down into the Catacombs. A lot of the other characters will be making small symbolic appearances along the way, especially Menace and Velka, because symbols of those two are everywhere. But by the end of this episode, hopefully you'll have a deeper grasp of Priscilla and what it means to be the Dark Moon Goddess. And here we are, once again in the old church in the woods. Now we know a symbol of Astora. Notice the roof and the broken pillars. And here where the Titanite demon thrashed around and destroyed this place, a symbol of menace. And so here we are once again with Andre of Astora, who represents Menace as he was when he was human, before he was given divine power by Gwyn, when he left Astora and became one of the great leaders of New Londo. And this was why, when we tried to ascend weapons with Andre of Astora here earlier, we were not able to, because he represents Menace before he had special powers himself, and therefore we need to give him special flames of the gods, to make ascended weapons. We now have two special flames, one from Astora and one from the divine blacksmith in the Darkroot Garden.
Why, that's a fine ember you have there. I could smith some mighty weapons with one of those. Why not lend it to me?
So the large ember allows Andre of Astora to raise a weapon from +5 to +10, or to create raw weapons.
Magnificent! You won't be disappointed. I can hardly wait to get started.
And this suggests that the ember was developed by Velka and Menace together to improve Menace's ability to affect the physical world.
My, that's a rare ember you have there. I've seen one of those before. It's the ember of a divine blacksmith. Might you consider leaving that with me? I could produce divine weapons with a flame such as that.
So it seems that Andre of Astora has seen the divine ember before. And Menace was Gwyn's blacksmith before he was married to Velka and sent to Astora. And this is where Andre of Astora saw the divine ember for the first time. This was the power that Gwyn had given to Menace, his blacksmith, to produce the weapons for him that he needed to fight his wars. And this also goes to suggest that Andre of Astora met Menace, and it also suggests that either Menace created Andre of Astora or is his father.
Thanks for that. You've made a fine decision. You soon shall see.
You'll also notice that Andre of Astora talks about lending the embers. He is not taking them as his own, and this is why Andre of Astora is in such a healthy state. He has not fallen to the dark. The act of coveting something that is not yours, the act of claiming something as yours, is a sign of humanity. By Andre of Astora only lending this from us with the intent of giving it back is what stops him from becoming mad and wicked like everybody else in Lordran. So now we are going to reinforce our first weapon. Remember that reinforcement is the same terminology that we use when we level up the Chosen Undead. So here we are, and we will reinforce this Morningstar. So here we have the Morning Star, a symbol of the Way of White as it is now. A barbaric collection of people without a god, desperately trying to hold back the armies of the dead with their undead hunts and their search for kindling in an attempt to keep alive old traditions. This is a very fitting weapon to ascend into a divine Morning Star to help us beat back the armies of the undead that we will find in today's episode in the Catacombs. Now notice what will happen to this Morning Star when we use Divine Flame to change its state, to allow it to break its cycle. It will gain magic damage, but lose some of its physical damage. This weapon will now be different to what it was before. And so now I'll just quickly buy some arrows. Now these episodes have gotten a bit long, so I'm going to start doing some jump cuts so that there's less dead air in the episodes. And here, having arrived in Firelink Shrine after we beat the Capra demon, is Reah of Thorolund. And just like all of the NPCs in Dark Souls, she represents a god of Analondo, and she represents Priscilla. And Reah of Thorolund shares a very similar visual appearance to Priscilla, with her travelling cloak that is frayed at the edges like the fur that we see on Priscilla's robes, and she is covered in white like Priscilla, though her hood forms a similar appearance to her hair. And here we have another family portrait being shown, just like before, and it's actually a very similar family portrait to the one that we saw down in the depths. Petrus here represents Seath the Scaleless. Notice the dragon on his shield. Here we have Nico, who covers his face and stifles his voice. Notice also the caduceus shields that each of these companions wear. This here is Vince. He has blonde hair. Notice Vince carries a standard mace and Nico carries a crescent axe. The crescent axe is wielded by clerics of an older era, while the mace is wielded by clerics of Havel the Rock's Way of White and onwards. So this is Vince and Nico, who wear a caduceus shield, and they wear that because they are the imperfect dragon. They are the crossbreed children of Priscilla, the Dark Moon Goddess, Vince being Gwendolyn and Nico being Velka. Gwendolyn is the child of Gwyn, while Velka's father we will discuss today later. And just quickly on the shields, this is the event that I was talking about in the last episode, where Fram and Karth were cut into two, seemingly by Sir Arturius, the Abyss Walker.
What have we here? You look awfully raggedy. Times are grim. The least you can do is look sharp. Don't you dare meet my lady like that. You might scare her off for good.
Vince is saying that because we are hollow, and that goes to show that he is a character that only sees or knows about the shallow aspects of existence in Lordran. He can only appreciate the world for what he sees it as. And this is very different from the other eras of the Way of White and shows the slow degradation of the Way of White in that the current generation don't even understand the different types of hollowing and what it means to be hollow and what it means to be human and the differences between all of those things. that is completely lost on them. And that's not to say that they are stupid, it's just that the information that was once there was lost after a series of catastrophes for the Way of White.
What if I got them like a dream?
Notice, even though Nico stifles his voice,
What if I got them like a dream?
his response has changed when we aren't hollow.
Oh, you again. What business have you? I don't suppose we can help, though. We accompany my lady on her righteous mission. It is quite a chore, but I'm stuck with her. And Nico, too. I can't very well abandon them now.
And this small piece of dialogue shows us the relationship between Priscilla and her children. Gwendolyn had a great affection for Gwyn and his sunlight, but cared very little for his nature as a dragon, to the point where by the end of his journey, he has stripped all of the purple from his regalia, showing his rejection of his nature as an everlasting dragon or as a scaleless dragon. Velka also feels stuck with Priscilla. She cares about Menace, she cares about the dark, she has very little interest in the moon. And of course, Priscilla stands between the perfect home, the perfect family that she could make with Menace.
You are undead as well. Then we've no time to fraternize. I have my mission and you no doubt have yours. We must not let this curse overcome us. Did I not explain the urgency of our tasks? Or are you so uncouth as to lack such judgment? By the looks of you, I should think not.
Now that is a pair of very cryptic pieces of dialogue. Reah of Thorolund has a mission. Priscilla, the Dark Moon Goddess, has a mission. The Chosen Undead has a mission. We all have a mission, but what is the nature of that mission? Who is this knight, and what is his mission?
Oh, hello. I regret meeting you under such compromising circumstances. At least we both made it back unscathed. Incidentally, would you care to learn any sorceries? You're clearly talented, and besides, I owe you. Of course, we will require some materials, but I'm happy to teach you some elementary spells. Are you interested? Splendid. Very well. I am pleased to have a chance to give something back. Well then, let's get started straight away.
So we discussed before how Griggs is a symbol of the everlasting dragons, and more specifically the drakes who still have missions out in the world and therefore are not as inert as the everlasting dragons, and we start to see these symbols come together with the items that he sells. With the Bellowing Dragon Crest ring and the Lingering Dragon Crest ring. The Bellowing Dragon Crest ring represents Seath the Scaleless. The Lingering Dragon Crest ring represents Priscilla. Seath the Scaleless is the Bellowing Dragon, and we see that in the opening cutscene where Seath sees the sunlight and realizes in that moment what he has done by helping Gwyn. Priscilla is the Lingering Dragon. She lingers in the background behind everything that happens in Lordran, and even in that scene with Seath, she is lingering in the background. Priscilla is represented symbolically in the opening cutscene with the storm that brews above Seath the Scaleless. So I'm just going to buy fall control here to help out with some of the falls in the Catacombs. This is a sorcery developed by a certain surreptitious sorcerer at the Vinheim Dragon School. Reduced damage and noise from fall. This sorcery, along with Hush, explains the extravagant cost of hiring Vinheim spooks. So this goes to tell us that the Vinheim Dragon School doesn't just produce sorcerers as we know them in fantasy novels, they also produce spooks, spies, and assassins. And that is what Griggs is up to here in Lordran. He is on a mission.
Have you heard of Big Hat Logan? Master Logan is a great sorcerer and my teacher. Both of us came to this land as undead. But one day he departed, leaving only a note. I suppose he wished to keep me out of harm's way. But where does that leave me? I have dedicated myself to sorcery, but Master Logan could find no use for me.
Here we see Griggs, betrayed by his own. Big Hat Logan, when we get around to meeting him, is the symbol of Seath the Scaleless. And what we're seeing in this dialogue is the relationship between the Drakes, the Everlasting Dragons, and Seath the Scaleless. The Everlasting Dragons are perplexed at why Seath would betray them. And they're not aggressive creatures, they're genuinely shocked about the revolution that came with Gwyn, about the betrayal that came from Seath the Scaleless. Griggs here says he gave everything to sorcery, and that's part of the perplexing nature of Seath the Scaleless, is the dragons gave everything to give him the night, and yet it wasn't enough. And it wasn't enough to the point where Seath the Scaleless betrayed them for somebody who coveted the light.
Yes, the note that Master Logan left. It only said he would travel to Anolondo by way of Sen's fortress. I can only guess that he seeks the regal archives. For Master Logan is a tireless pursuer of wisdom. Wisdom trumps all. Everything else is hogwash. When the curse turned him undead, I'm certain that he only felt it was the perfect chance to visit this land. I only wish that I had his courage. 2 things are required for sorcery. First, you must equip a wand. Second, you must attune a sorcery. Then you will be ready to fire away. Oh, and don't forget.
Notice how Griggs says he wishes he had Logan's courage. This goes to the nature of the Everlasting Dragons. They are not courageous, they're not brave, they're not aggressive. They act when they're threatened and when there is a mission.
Did you see them? The 3 young clerics headed for the Catacombs to seek kindling. Kindling is the art of feeding bonfires. The poor young girl sent down into a tomb. What a terrible mission she is burdened with.
So there we are, reminded by Griggs about Reah of Thorolund's mission, seeking kindling. Though that is not the true nature of her mission, as the clerics of Thorolund do not quite know why they still do what they do. But this is said by Griggs and commented on by Griggs because this is also the Everlasting Dragons. Looking at Reah of Thorolund, looking at Priscilla, the Dark Moon Goddess, and feeling pity for them and their mission in this age of fire. So we'll come back and talk to Lord Trenius of the Great Swamp in a future episode. Today we just want to focus on Priscilla and the Catacombs. So here we have the Witch of Isolith sitting atop a tree, representing the fact that she's a giant. And in her arms she holds Priscilla, the Dark Moon Goddess. And notice she holds her child at a distance, because this is the relationship that the Witch of Isolith had with her children, Priscilla and the firstborn. The Witch of Isolith tends to buck the trend of the other characters in Lordran. The other characters coddle their children and try to protect them. The Witch of Isolith is not like that. She's much more like a raven or a crow or bird. She pushes her children from the nest and they will fly or they will fall. I was hoping to find this shield a little bit later, but RNG has given us the gift of the wrong shield early on. So now we can discuss this up here in the graveyard. I just died a few times in the graveyard, so I'm just going to cut all that out because this episode is running long. So just there I found the small caduceus shield. So while I try to safely clear out the skeletons this time, let's just discuss the nature of what this area is. The graveyard is a more haphazard version of the catacombs that we are about to descend into, and that is because this area represents the chaos of war and the dead that come from strife and conflict. And so what we are finding here, what we are seeing here, is a visual representation of all of the warriors that have fallen in Lordran throughout the generations. And that is why we find the different small shields in this area. They represent different conflicts and different deaths. We have the warrior's round shield that we discussed being connected to a story, but is also here. And that is because these are servants of Priscilla or Velka, depending on the version of the shield that we're talking about, because Priscilla ruled the Catacombs for a short while along with Velka. But these warriors, these skeletons, actually dropped the red and the white shield. And that is because the red and the white shield and that is because the red and the white shield represents the first flame, the divine flame, red and white. And this also represents the unity of the gods. This was when all the warriors fought under one banner, with Gwyn, the Witch of Isolith, and Nito as their leaders. And this solid caduceus shield represents one of the other four, not Framp and Karth. And this represents one of the many dark revolutions. So this giant skeleton is the first example we have of the half-breed of giants and humans that we saw depicted in the undead church on the relief of races worshipping Priscilla. And these half-giants seem to have fought in the wars with the everlasting dragons. But they are also here as a symbol of the giants themselves, and notice they stand here in front of a grave marked with that same 5-circle configuration that we talked about with the target shield. So we find the winged spear, which is a symbol of the firstborn of Gwyn, and above we see the eagle. This is the mark of the half-giants. And this is the insignia that they served under in Gwyn's army. Notice that the eagle looks suspiciously like an everlasting dragon. And this also goes to the idea that the firstborn is the son of the Witch of Isolith. So here we have another symbol of the giants, but this one is not alone. This one is leading a cohort of humans. This is a general. A giant with men. And very fittingly, this giant general has led his men off a cliff. So let me just deal with the last of these men, and we'll return to discuss the gravestone. So here in front of this giant grave, we have the Zweihänder. This is the weapon wielded by the bumbling Sir Onion, Sigmire of Katarina, a symbol of Havel the Rock. Havel the Rock was a giant. Notice that the grave has white flowers around it, and the path to this gravestone is well tended, as though somebody really wishes to remember Havel the Rock. And so over here, if we remember all the way back to one of the earliest episodes, this was the area where we found the binoculars, a very important symbol of Menace as it represented his desperation to leave Astora. So why is it over here? Why is it in the graveyard, this very important symbol of Menace? It's because this is a land that Menace himself used to oversee. This is the eastern part of Lordran, and Menace used to rule in the Age of Ancients, the Eastern Land. And in the Eastern Land was where he created Gwyn's army of constructs, marked by the symbol of a lion. And notice here quickly that over here on the eastern side of Lordran, we can see what looks like a dawning sun. But then we saw a sun high in the sky over by the watchtower. There seem to be two suns in Lordran, though this seems to contradict what Velka tells us at the very beginning of the game, which is man sees only night. And that is because what we are seeing are not suns, they are something else. The whole of Lordran is more like the Darkroot Garden, where there is an endless night. But there are a mix of reasons of why we are seeing these different suns all over Lordran, but we'll talk all about that later, after we've seen the different suns around the kingdom. And so here we have a set of symbols that will tell us part of the story of Dark Souls. And these symbols are Elder Futhark runes. And you'll see that they mark these stones here, these large stones. And what they are boundary markers. So let's decipher these Elder Futhark runes, and then we can discuss their importance. So these are a little harder to read because there's actually two layers of runes. One has been graffitied over another. The first two symbols here are the major boundary markers. These are wards. The first symbol is Ensus, which means in the real world, the god Odin. So if you believe that Gwyn is a stand-in for Odin, then this means Gwyn. If you don't believe that, fortunately this symbol also means a great leader, which would also represent Gwyn. The next symbol is Algiz, and that means divine protection. We've already talked about Therazaz, which was the physical protection, being a bodyguard. This symbol, Algiz, represents divine protection. So this together means Gwyn's divine protection. This is Gwyn's boundary marker. Everything beyond this boundary marker is Gwyn's property. And then scribbled over the top of it, very importantly, but we'll talk about this in another episode later on, is the symbol Urzus, which means aurochs, which is a type of European bull. And then we see, along with that, a rune we've already seen, Ophelia, which means inheritance or inherits. So, graffitied over the top of Gwyn's divine protection, Gwyn's boundary stone. Someone has scribbled, "The bull inherits." And we'll talk about that later. But why is there a boundary marker in Lordran? All of the lords were united when they defeated the everlasting dragons. So something must have come between them.